going to forget. Okay. All right, hopefully we're back where we were. So, email. So this is what I thought we'd cover. Again, the focus is really on how stuff works. Now, I don't have a huge number of slides today, so feel free to interrupt me whenever something occurs to you. So start with an overview of how email is handled, from sending to receiving. A breakdown of email messages. We'll go through sending, routing emails across the internet, receiving emails, spam filtering, and these new checks, let's say, to reduce spam filtering, SPF and such like. And then we'll wrap up with some old-fashioned netiquettes, good practices, and sub-addresses. And I bet most of you haven't heard of sub-addresses. So, so let's play on. So an overview. So this is my little base diagram. So we've got a guy down the bottom left-hand corner, and he's going to be sending email for the purposes today. And he's got an account on this server, this domain here, my.com. And the example we'll be running through is sending an email from here all the way across the internet of a laser pointer to the destination server here. And we'll talk through about how the underlying protocols and so on work. So this server here could be your ISP. So let's say if you're with Virgin Media, that could be virginmedia.com. But it doesn't have to be. You could be signed up to Virgin Media and use Google for your email processing. So, but whatever server you're using for your, that's the server we're talking about. So, first thing we do, of course, is to compose an email, and then we send that email. We compose the email on our desktop in our email client. We hit send. And that goes to a destination address, a username and then an email domain. And that message from your desktop gets sent to either your ISP server or the server that's supporting your email services, Gmail or something. That server will then route the email.
Oh, sorry, Peter, are you happy to take questions as you go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just use it.
If the mail server is, so as you say, Google in the example there,
yep.
that particular server shown on the screen, it just passes it through, straight through, does it? Does it do anything to it?
Yes. So if your personal email address is, let's say, ray@gmail.com, when you compose your email address, the from address will be your Gmail address. And then your email client will send it to the Google servers here. This will be the Google servers.
Well, let's say that server is, I don't know, Virgin Media in the top left.
No. Don't confuse the two, right? So if your ISP is Virgin Media,
yeah,
you've got a cable in your house that's supplied by Virgin Media.
That just passes it straight through unadulterated.
Okay, so that your Virgin Media will be used for browsing the internet or using Skype or whatever it is. But for email, if you're using Google for email, you will not use a Virgin Media server to send email.
But it will go through the server. If your ISP is Virgin Media, that's your only interface with the internet, surely. So your email must pass through the Virgin Media server.
Only in the sense of going through routers and VLANs and stuff like that. Only networking.
Oh, okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. So it's basically passed straight through, untouched.
Yes. So your email client, in your case, will make a connection to gmail.com and deliver the email up to Google.
Okay.
So your local email server, the one that you're interacting, will then route that email to the destination server. And then, of course, the guy you're sending the email to, harry@there.com in this case, will fetch that email from their server and display it on their desktop. So we've got multiple stages in this discussion. We've got composing, we've got sending to the server that supports your email, we've got routing across the internet, and we've got fetching email and reading it. And we'll go through each of those step by step. So composing email. We've all done it, right? Either on your desktop or your phone or whatever it is. And you get a nice graphical window and, you type in your to address and your subject and you type in the message body. But what you're doing really is creating a file which is simply plain text. And this is the minimum email that you can send, really. So an email has a number of headers, and we've got 3 headers in this case, and they all start with the header type or name, a colon, and then what it's referencing. So we've got from address, we've got to address, we've got subject, and these are email headers. Now, in practice, there's many more standard headers than I'm showing here. This is a minimum set, but also there's some non-standard headers that can be set. And if you're interested, you can go into your email client on your desktop and click on something like view source or view all headers, and you'll get a whole ring, probably 20 or 30 headers, which is associated with your email. But this is the minimum set. And then you'll notice here, there's a blank line. That blank line is pretty critical. That blank line indicates the end of all the headers. And anything after that blank line is the email content that you're trying to send as well. So we've got headers, blank line, and message. And so when you're on your desktop and you're composing, you're using a fancy tool, email client to compose your message, that tool is creating this message, a set of headers, blank line, and then the message. And of course, these headers are used in various different ways to route your message around the internet or, tag if it's spam or all sorts of purposes these headers are for. Now, there's a nice little tool here. It's mxtoolbox.com. They've got a tool on that site which actually interprets all your headers of your email message. So what you can do is you can go on your desktop, you can view the source of your email, copy and paste it up to this address, and it'll give you an analysis of your email headers. And all sorts of information will come up to it. It'll give you all the authentication information. It'll give you how much time it's taken to be delivered across the internet. This report just scrolls on and on and on. So if you are ever having problems of email delivery, this is one of the tools that you can use to analyze your headers. Yes, you can go in. Yeah, go on.
Another question. That's your outgoing email you put in there, not an incoming one.
Either will work.
Either, right. Okay.
It's more interesting to look at headers for incoming emails.
Yes.
Because all the delivery adds and manipulates the headers, so we'll give you more information. Yeah, so that's headers. So the message. So in the example, very simple email example I had earlier with 3 headers, a blank line, and a message. The message itself was just simply in plain text. And of course, back in the day, all emails were in plain text. Then I come across this new standard, got a spelling mistake there, MIME, which is a way to embed rich graphics into plain text. And this is what it looks like. So if you send a message which is MIME encoded rather than plain text, you'll have your normal minimum 3 headers, and then you'll have an additional header which tells you its content type. And the contact type in this case is multi-part alternative. And we've got this magic key, which is a boundary. And then the message itself uses this boundary to split various parts of your message apart. Now, each part will have a content type. It could be text, or it could be HTML, or it could be an image, or, a PDF attachment or whatever, and then has the actual content itself. So in this way, so if you're sending a sort of like a modern day message containing lots of text, lots of images, a few attachments, when that gets sent, your email client will attach each of those separate parts of the message as a separate MIME encoded, and your email just becomes very, very long. And here's an example of a MIME part, which is HTML.
Right, and then actually, as it's turned out, it went further away than I thought.
I mean, originally, at one time you were saying, we said 3:15.
Yeah, and then I went 3,
Yeah.
3:15.
It's all right.
All right, do I need to mute everyone?
Yep.
All right,
Go
I'll carry on. If you got some background noise, if you can mute yourself. So another multi-part in your would be a HTML. We've got a HTML tag here, and here we've got the HTML tags, and this will obviously come up as a new paragraph in this case, but of course you can have italics and bolds and all the rich text features you get in HTML. So when you're composing emails these days, it's usually going to be a HTML email. It's going to be multi-part. You're going to attach images, and your email message actually gets quite long. So it's actually quite interesting. Compose a normal email and just look at the size of it. You just want to say, hello, Fred, and it's about 10 gigabytes long or something. Time all the headers and different fonts gets attached and whatever.
Sorry, Peter, another question. This is always me. This is on the assumption you're using an email client on the first computer, not using a web browser access.
Yep, I'll come on to web-based email a bit later.
Okay. Yep.
But yes, so for the moment, we're assuming you're sat on your desktop composing your email, and you're sending it around, and some other ones, with some destinations receiving it. Of course, this could be your phone or your tablet or whatever, but this is assuming that you're not using webmail, you're just using a standard email client. So then, once you've composed your email, you've got all your headers, your blank line, and the body of the text, you hit send. And at that point, what happens is that your desktop here will make a connection to your email server. So if you're using Virgin Media email, your email client will be configured to connect to the Virgin Media email server. If you're using Google, it'll be configured to connect to Google. If you're using Yahoo, it'll be configured to connect to Yahoo, and so on. And so there's a protocol here which is used to upload that email up to your server. And that protocol is called Simple Mail Transport Protocol, or SMTP. And it's actually remarkably simple. It's one of these very old protocols from the 70s, I think. So it's a protocol to send an email message to the server. And it requires some information for this to work. So you need to know the host name that you're going to connect to. You need to know the port number. And the typical standards is 25 for unencrypted and 587 for encrypted. Of course, these days, everything you really want to send is being encrypted. And usually you'll be asked to supply authentication information, your username and password. And all this will be provided by your email provider. So, if you sign up to, let's say, Yahoo email, and you click on their help page, they'll give you all these details here, and you type those into your email client. So when you send email messages, it can connect to the right server and deliver your message. Now,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Question. Oh, So I go so far back with this stuff. I thought email was not generally encrypted, but I take it most email is encrypted today.
Yeah, so in the same way we used to use HTTP for web surfing, and then
Yeah.
HTTPS came along, which was
Okay.
the same but over a secure socket layers, exactly the same for here. So port 25 is used for plain unencrypted. In other words,
Yes.
you sniff the network and see the traffic going along. 587 is SMTP over a secure transport, so it's encrypted. So if
Okay.
you-
There's also a
But can the people
465.
inside the US, the ISP, the technical people, can they read the emails?
Yes, so encryption over the network is to stop anyone between your desktop and your email server from intercepting it. When it
Okay.
arrives at the email server, it will
Yes.
have to be encrypted, the header's read, and then delivered to its final destination.
But can the staff working at the ISP at either end, can they read the email?
If in your if your ISP is Virgin Media
Yes.
and your email is with Google, Virgin Media will not be able to read your email
Okay.
because the encryption is between you and Google.
Thank you.
Paul, you got your hand up, waiting patiently, and you're muted, and you're still muted.
He's trying.
You can do it, Paul. You're still muted, so we can't hear you. All right, I'm going to move on, Paul, because I can't hear you.
Yeah, just one other, Peter. There's also a 465, isn't there, other than the 587?
Yeah, I mean, these port numbers are conventions. They're not part of any official standard. As far as I can see, 587 is the most common for SMTP. I'm sure Paul's got a good point to make. He usually does, but let's push on unless we can hear him. So this protocol is actually remarkably simple. So, and you can do it from a command line, you know, so you can open up your command line on your text and you can send an email message just by typing stuff in. And I don't know if you know, there's this general purpose command called telnet, which makes a connection to a remote server. So you make a connection to your email server at port 25, and anything in light is what I'm receiving back. And each command in SMTP is these 4-letter words. So hello with one L is the initial start. You give mail from address, who's it sending to, and then you send your email, and that's it. So SMTP is a remarkably simple protocol, simply used to deliver an email message from one place to another. Okay, I'm hoping Paul will come back and ask his or make his point. So moving on. So now our email message has moved from your desktop to your mail server that supports it. And now we need a mechanism to route that email to destination. All we've got so far is that this message is supposed to go to this email address. That's all we've got. And somehow we've got to get this email to the correct target server. So we've talked about this before. The domain name service, DNS, is one of these massively distributed databases, really initially designed to map host names to IP addresses. But in the DNS server, there's a whole bunch of other things in there. And there is a type of record in DNS called an MX record or mail exchange record. And that is used to map email domain to target server name. So you can use MX Toolbox to look at these MX records if you like, or you can use command line. Now, once this server has found a target server to send it to, again, it's just going to use SMTP to forward the message on. Now, this is what an MX record looks like. So we've asked DNS to return us DNS records of type MX. We've asked to look up the sender's domain. The sender's domain there.com. And the response we've actually got 2 records here. So this is telling us, if you want to send an email to there.com, in other words, fred@there.com or harry@there.com, then talk to this server name. And if that server name should fail or be unavailable, you've got a backup server name here. So typically all the big servers will have several different email servers that will all work. If one of them's down, another one can be tried. So it's quite very reliable service. So this MX record is there to map target domain name, who you're trying to send to the server that supports that service. So we are sending an email to there.com. Our own personal email server has discovered that this server here, mail.there.com, actually can deliver emails for that address. Hopefully that's reasonably straightforward. Now I will branch off a little bit here. When I had my first email address, it didn't have this @ sign in. It was just a series of server names with exclamation marks in between them. It was called UUCP style addressing. And it's a bit like if you want to explain to someone how to drive from your house to the nearest pub or something like that. There's 2 ways you could describe how to do that journey. You could give them, what you normally do these days is, this is a postcode. And then they type in that postcode into the sat nav. The sat nav would convert that postcode into a physical location and figure out how to get there. And that's how modern day email works. We just give it a domain name, and there's this DNS mechanism that enables you to look up its final destination. Now, the alternative way that you could give directions of how to get from your house to the pub is you could say, right, turn left outside a house, then go to the roundabout, take a second right, then the 4th junction on the left, and so on. In other words, step by step, how to get from A to B. And with that mechanism, you don't need any other database to look up. You don't need DNS and email examples. You don't need postcodes. You can get from A to B without any further database or maps or anything. The downside, of course, is if you get lost on the way, then you really are lost. You've got no way to do it. So my personal email address started off as Peter, ! my local server, ! my town server, ! and then destination. In other words, emails used to work the same way as giving directions, how to go from server to server to server to get to your destination. That's a little bit of an aside. These days, email is routed via the DNS MX records. Now, so far we've composed our email with.
Sorry, Peter. Another question. Where's the DNS held?
DNS is one of these massively distributed databases. And so it's not held in any one place, but there is a hierarchy. There is an organization that manages it, and that organization then delegates various areas. For example, .co.uk is delegated to the UK and so on. So there are organizations and companies that manage these DNS, and all the records are distributed. So for example, Google has got in fact, I showed it here. Google has got a DNS server at address 8.8.8.8, and that's quite a reliable server. And your local ISP, your Virgin Media, they'll also have a DNS server which you can talk to. It usually doesn't matter which DNS server you do because they replicate you and delegate and so on. But think of it as a massively distributed database. And if you wanted to add a record to your DNS, then you need to talk to whoever manages your domain. I mean, I've got my own domain, which is plaw.co.uk, and then I can manipulate my own DNS entries, anything on plaw.co.uk. So I'm responsible for that domain.
Out of interest, the 8.8.8.8, is that a US base or UK, or does it appear in several locations around the world?
It's one of these that's behind a virtual IP address. So chances are, if you're in the UK and you resolve 8.8.8, it will actually go to a physical server in the UK.
Ah, right, okay.
Okay, so these things are designed to be incredibly fast and incredibly resilient. Paul, you're back with your hand up. Go on, unmute yourself. You can do it.
I think he is unmuted, he just can't talk. His microphone's gone or something.
Well, he's muted. I can see that he's still muted.
Oh, okay. Oh, he is now.
Nope, still nothing from Paul. Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to carry on. So we've composed our emails. We've got a header, a blank line, the message body. We use SMTP to send it to our local email server. Our local email server has looked up the destination in DNS, found the target machine, delivered it over to here. So email is now sat on here. It's been deleted from here. And the last question is, how do you download, or how does this guy download the message to actually be able to read? And in fact, there's two protocols that's commonly used to download and read email messages. One is POP3, Post Office Protocol, and the other is IMAP. And these work slightly differently. So these are two very alive protocols, and your email client will, I guarantee, will support both of them. So it's worth looking really how they work. Remember that POP is the older of the two protocols. So your message is going to be on a server, and what we're trying to achieve here is to get this message on your desktop so you can read it. So with the Post Office Protocol, POP. Oh, I've got a message on chat. I wonder if that's or. Oh, Paul's just reporting his messages. Right, so the Post Office Protocol, the way that works is you download your message using this old protocol, and it gets deleted from the server. And now it's just on your PC now, that message. And you
Sorry,
can...
Peter, interrupt again.
Yep.
It's not necessarily deleted. It depends on the setting of your computer, whether it deletes it or not.
Yes, that is probably true. But with POP, remember we're only talking about POP here, not IMAP.
Yeah, but normally POP does delete by default, but there is a
POP,
setting.
Yeah,
there's a setting on your computer which can actually say don't delete from the server.
Yeah, so let me rephrase what I said there. The expected behavior, if you look through the standards, is that with POP, you aren't supposed to keep the message on the server. Yes, you can override that default behavior, but the idea is that you keep your messages on your desktop. That's the principle behind POP. And the reason is that POP is a very simple, there's no folders or structures or filtering or anything like that. It's just a very simple download protocol. But the problem is, if you download it and have the default settings, which means it gets deleted from your server, if then you go to your phone and try to read that message, it's gone. It's not on the server anymore. It's on your desktop. So if you ever get this situation where you're reading emails from multiple devices and they're not in sync, the chances are you're using POP and one of your devices has deleted it from the server.
And it's the first one who gets the message.
Exactly, yeah. So you can have all kinds of mixtures of going on. So the more modern way to do it is to use IMAP, Internet Message Access Protocol. Now, this is a much richer protocol. It allows to have folders on the server. It allows to have filtering rules on the server and so on. And the way IMAP is supposed to work is that it's the other way to POP, is it's designed to leave your messages on the server. So you can read on this desktop, but you've still got the original on the server, which means when you fire up your phone, you can still see exactly the same view of all your messages. And of course, as I said, IMAP supports folders and filtering, and and most likely have a web-based version of it as well. So, strong recommendation here is to simply use IMAP for everything. POP will probably get you into problems at some point. So I've got a couple of hands up, Frank. You're muted.
Yeah, so I used POP for 25 years successfully.
Mhm.
I did override the default thing, so it kept messages on there for 2 weeks. But I didn't really have a big need for synchronization, and I found it worked fine. However, recently, though, I was forced to switch to SMTP. I'm sorry, to IMAP. And I've had some real challenges. I mean, the worst thing is if you interfere with the synchronization, you can leave. Sometimes I spend, I don't know, half an hour writing an email, and it goes poof because I frequently, before I send one, I will open it and take a last look. But that is dangerous. So, is there any way of avoiding that problem?
I actually don't recognize the problem you described. I switched to IMAP as soon as it was available.
Yes.
And my way of thinking is that my emails are on the server. So I organize the server into folders. I automatically filter incoming messages into the right folder. All the U3A stuff gets filtered into U3A folder, and I have exactly the same view of all these folders on all my devices.
It sounds like a sending problem rather than an IMAP POP problem to me.
Yes, quite possibly.
There's another aspect, which is it depends what email server you're using. They'll have settings for the POP and IMAP behaviors. So, for example, I think on Google, with IMAP, there's a setting where you can have it archive the message rather than delete it completely. So perhaps as a sort of safety feature, you could do that. And so if it does disappear from your sendbox or whatever, you can then at least have a look in the archive to see if it's there.
Okay.
Thanks, David. Okay, Mike.
Yes, thanks, Peter. I hope you're hearing me okay. So when we talk about using IMAP as the default protocol, does that mean that all devices have to be configured for IMAP? So in your example here, you've got a desktop machine running IMAP, and does the tablet or phone have to use the same, or can it be a mixture of both?
It can be a mixture. But remember, if, for example, your desktop supported POP and then you deleted the message off the server, then your phone using IMAP wouldn't be able to see that message anymore. So it's much easier to simply use IMAP everywhere. And on smaller devices, phones and tablets, what it'll tend to do, it won't download all the messages from the server over IMAP. It'll just download, let's say, the most recent 20 messages or something to save memory on smaller devices.
So my second question, sir, is when you talked about having a folder structure on the IMAP server, do you have to exactly replicate that folder configuration on your other devices?
And that's done for you. So for example, if you're on your desktop PC and you create a folder called U3A, all right, when you look at your phone, that folder will then appear because your phone will download it from the server.
Without
all
configuring it, you don't have to manually create all the identical folder structure.
Nope.
No, it's all synchronized via the mail server.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try it.
Yeah.
Am I live now, by the way?
Paul.
Yes,
Oh.
hi. Sorry. 3 problems at once, and it was the third one was the real problem.
Oh, sorry about that.
And it's because I'm using a web browser to access Zoom, because they don't make a version for macOS, and so it's outside the sandbox. Using the web browser version, it doesn't have any. It doesn't save settings for you. Anyway, we're here, right? Thank you. I just want to make a point, if it's helpful. I've had problems with emails going missing when I've been typing long ones, and it's usually down to a connectivity drop at some point. And particularly where I am at the moment, the mobile signal's up and down like crazy. Although it's 4-bar, it's not operating properly, and they know that. So what I do, and it may be helpful to people, I open a text file or I open a Word document if it's a long email, and I cut and paste from there into the actual server at the time I'm ready to send it. And it actually helps with the formatting, and you can see it all better presented sometimes. So that might help people. Just winding back a little bit, if I may, on the DNS, Peter, I believe it really matters. The DNS itself is often set by your ISP, isn't it? Or your VPN, and you don't always have a choice. Though I have found you can default to Google, but you have to go into your settings and change them, and it's not always a straightforward situation of just typing in 8.8.8.8 in the command line bar. Am I correct on that?
Yes. So when your cable modem or ADSL modem connects to your ISP, it will be given the DNS server that your ISP uses. And then your cable modem or ADSL modem will then give that same DNS addresses to all your devices on your home network. But you can always override it, right? So I'm using a Mac here. I can just go into settings and just add a new DNS server, and that will overwrite whatever has been given to me on my network. Now, we also had a talk a while back about ad blocking. And one way to do ad blocking is to run your own DNS server on your local network, and anything to do with ads, your local DNS server will just throw that request in the bin. So personally, I would always recommend running a local DNS server, because then you can do all this ad blocking type stuff, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah, you'd have to populate that though, wouldn't you, to a certain extent?
Yeah. There's some good tools like AdGuard does all that stuff for you.
Okay. On the because I have noticed dropouts on certain internet functions, and it's largely been down to Virgin, in my case at the old house, their DNS going down. So sometimes emails were getting delivered, but I couldn't get on the web, and sometimes vice versa. And I'm fairly certain that was always down to DNS problems.
Yeah,
even though there was plenty of signal.
and what is a very common configuration is that you overwrite the DNS settings on your router. The first one you leave at your ISP's address, and then you put a secondary DNS server, which is Google or your favorite big DNS server. So if your ISP's DNS servers fail, then you can do a backup to Google.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I tried. Just quickly moving on, the end-to-end encryption, I don't believe is guaranteed on mail, is it? And partly because people are using different clients and different email servers. So we've got effectively TLS, haven't we, between me and my ISP, and from there to a mail server. But where it goes from there could be unclear. Could be left in clear on the mail server too, at my end or at their end, but then you don't know what the recipient is using at their end, and that again could be unencrypted, couldn't it?
Yes, that is all correct. You use an email, All you can control is what you're using on your desktop. You really want to protect your SMTP traffic that you're sending, because that contains, or will probably contain, your username and password. So if you're in a cyber cafe, or in an airport or something like that, you really don't want anyone sniffing the network to get your username and password. But once your message has got to your mail server, then your username and password is no longer there, so it kind of matters less. But you can guarantee that any email server will be encrypting their messages as it goes to the next server.
Yeah, I think the big issue with passwords is that people have apps on their phones, and even if you use a VPN, by the time the VPN's connected at the airport or whatever, there's no guarantee that your app hasn't gone off and tried to grab the last 50 emails while you've been in a train tunnel or something like that, in which case it's already made that connection and it's game over, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'd say just don't use non-TLS messaging at all,
Yeah, the big issue I've had, Peter, is talking to lawyers recently when I went through a divorce, and all the financial information, which is incredibly sensitive and market sensitive too when it comes to buying a house, and estate agents do the same, and so do conveyancers. It's all going via email, and email is not guaranteed end-to-end encrypted. And the problem is you've got to have compatible clients to be able, or compatible systems to be able to guarantee it's end-to-end encrypted, because at some point it can go in clear. And you don't know they're not using SMTP at their end.
Hold that thought for a moment, Paul, because as we move on, you'll see there is now a mechanism to do end-to-end encryption.
Yeah, okay. And just finally, sorry, while you're on this slide at the moment, did you say it's possible for a mix of protocols? People are using different clients, different servers, different configurations, and there's somewhere there's a translation service that says, well, I received this on POP or whatever, I'm now going to send it to somebody over IMAP.
Yes, so your local email server, your local email server, this guy here, will typically support multiple protocols, because they've got to support lots of different users. So they'll have a copy of your message, and that can be downloaded or read via POP or IMAP or webmail or whatever, really. And so, yes, you can run POP on here, you can run IMAP on here, but you're going to get into trouble at some point, because if that message gets deleted, then you're not going to be able to see it on your IMAP server. And your clients are going to get out of sync.
Yeah, I think it's largely done. I mean, people just put a username and a password into a client, don't they, that they downloaded, and the client largely takes care of the protocol. But you're right, there is some tweaking that you can do on some of the clients.
Yep.
Sorry, can I just go back and pick up on this end-to-end encryption business? If you send a message which starts out encrypted, doesn't it stay encrypted till it gets to the recipient's client?
So the way SMTP will work is it will create an encrypted channel, a TLS channel, and it will send your email message. And that email address, that message will consist of headers, a blank line, and the body of a message. Now, your local email server has got to got to read that message in plain text, has to read the headers so it can pass that message and handle it onwards. And it's going to add new data to the headers as it passes through. So email will be in plain text on these servers in all cases. What the transport layer security is trying to protect against is if you're in an airport or something, is someone's trying to sniff your username and password, which is sent over the wire on SMTP, and it's encrypted, that can't be read.
So it's just between yourself and your mail server, the encryption applies. After that, all bets are off. All bets are off,
yeah. Generally, we'll talk some more about that a little bit later, but generally treat email as a anyone can read it type server, same as text messages, right?
A bit like a postcard, in the sense you give it to the postman, and the postman may not look at it, but it could be looked at somewhere along the line, is the way I think of it. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I jump in, because it looks as though people are not bothering putting their hands up? They're just just before I actually ask my question or make my point, I think Paul just said that he was using a web browser because he couldn't get a Zoom app for his Mac. There's a Zoom app for the Mac. I'm
You
using
can
it.
do, but it's not in the App Store, which means you've got to break the Apple firewall and garden wall effectively to install it. And it means it doesn't go through their scrutiny process, and I won't do that.
Well, you just have to download it, and when you want to open it, all you have to do is to say open. So
No,
it's
you can do,
difficult.
no, I won't do that for my own security. I can do it on the on the phone
Okay.
and on the iPad because they've got a version in the Mac Store. But I
Okay.
don't put stuff on the computer,
Right.
and that's all I'm saying. But you can run it from a web browser. It just doesn't have the full functionality.
Okay. Okay. Coming back to POP versus IMAP, I tend to avoid IMAP like the plague. I'm not sure. Peter, you can probably tell me, if I want to get back at old messages, if it's on IMAP, how far can I go back?
Typically forever. All email servers that I've ever dealt with just simply keep all email messages on IMAP. They don't remove them. There's likely to be a limit on disk space. You know, I think Google, for example, gives you something like 15 gigabytes free. Once that is free, then your emails will stop working. They won't delete them as such. So IMAP should stay on the servers forever.
Okay, it may be the limit on how much storage you've got. I tend to keep all my emails, and I do have need to get back to some of them occasionally. And indeed, I've got the last 20 years worth of them all readily available. And what I do, I use POP. I store them on my Mac. I put them in year folders for inbox and sent. So and then I use the Mac for searching. It's very fast, of course. On things like my phone and my iPad, in order to stop them being deleted, I think you put recent ahead of your email address, or I think it's the email address. I think it's recent. I'd have to check. If you do that, it won't download them. It'll leave them on the server, and then I can set the Mac email client to delete it after whatever period of time I want. Normally a month. And so I never have any problems. I can get back at any emails I've either received or sent. That's my reason for trying to avoid IMAP, but it can be done. I'm sure IMAP's okay, but it is this ability to get back at things with all their attachments and everything, because I have the benefit of having a sort of quite large SSD on my Mac. So I don't have a storage problem.
From what you've described, you should see no difference in behavior between IMAP and POP3. You can still, download stuff with IMAP and POP3. You can keep them on the server, do what you like. Yeah. The big difference
I can get at my messages offline, of course. So I could get back to things, attachments or messages that were sent 20 years ago. That just happened to be 20 years that I've got.
Yeah. So what?
And I can do it offline.
What email clients on your desktop will do with IMAP is download everything anyway and have a copy locally. So if you lose your internet connection, you can still read them. That's what, I just use MacMail. That's what MacMail does. If you're using Thunderbird, that's what Thunderbird does, and so on.
How long does it keep them then?
Forever. There's
on your Mac?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. And I know that I appreciate what you're doing, and I've got a friend who what he does on his little home Linux server, he uses POP. In fact, he uses FetchMail, a command line email client that uses POP to download messages to his internal server, and then he runs an IMAP server internal to his home network and serves it to all his devices. So there's lots of various combinations here that you can do.
The other thing I do is for emails I send out from my phone, I get them to copy to myself so that they come back in onto my Mac so that I can store them, because I don't store
Yeah.
it on the phone.
You have to do that with POP. If you use IMAP, the default behavior of email clients is usually to copy the message into your sent folder. And because that sent folder is stored on the server, then you've got that message that you sent on all your clients.
Right.
Right, so we've got some hands up. Peter's next on my list.
Okay, sounds like we have a debate between POP3 and IMAP. I use IPAP. I've got 24 years on IMAP, so I go like you do, Peter, to a certain extent. There's one thing which, and I buy Google Space, as you say, the disk space you buy, you can increase it. So if you find yourself running against your limit, you buy more space and you take the hit on that. The issue which puzzles me about this storage space, it's based on Google. Google's workspace, what they allow you to have. Now, that is combined with everything. So Google Drive and your mail space, all one part of a thing. So the underlying storage mechanism, my question, the underlying storage mechanism, if you're with Google, is this kind of disk space, isn't it? That's where it's all stored, isn't it? As far as I can make out, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, but with Google, you can look on the server and see what percentage of your allocation is used for email or photos or Google
sure.
and so on. I mean, what I do at the moment actually with Google is I have several Google accounts and I don't pay for any of them. And then I use one for photos, another one for different types of photographs, and some for emails and so on.
I work on the base unit, don't get something for nothing. So basically, when you put the stuff on their server, they clearly have the right, or put it, you may well sign away that they can look through your emails and do things to your emails. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, Google in particular will filter all your emails, and you know you can treat it as a service. So if you get an email which has got, let's say, a flight times inside the email, Google will recognize that and add it to your calendar. And they do all sorts of filtering like that. If you like that, use Google. If you don't like that, don't use Google. You know, there's obviously a big privacy question mark there before Paul says it.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Thank you.
Steve.
Hi. My first time on the session with you guys. I can tell there's a lot of experience around this WebEx which is going on here. I've got a real life email problem. I wonder if you could help me with, and I've had it for over a year and I can't seem to get any answer from Google. I've got a number, like the other gentleman, I've got a number of different email accounts, one of which is a Hotmail account. And whenever I send an email to somebody from my PC or my laptop, it works fine. Whenever I send them an email from my iPhone, it sends them 2 emails. Any idea?
Sends them to.
But only from this one account, not from the other accounts.
Are they absolutely identical?
Yes, absolutely identical.
I wonder if you've got a setting somewhere on the phone that is telling it to do that on the, because I assume you're using the Hotmail app, or the what was it, the Outlook app they now call it, on your iPhone, and not a web browser. And it could be a setting be worth looking through the settings on the app on your phone, because I use both.
Yeah, when I looked through the settings, I was doing it as you were talking, because it's the first time I've heard about IMAP and all that lot. And I was checking that, yeah, my account is IMAP'd, and looked at the account settings, which was all good.
It'd be the SMTP that you'll be concerned about here if it's sending 2 emails.
Say again?
Is it sending 2 emails or receiving 2?
It's sending 2.
Yeah, well, that'd be the SMTP side.
It is an interesting one. You might want to check to see if you've got any email rules on your desktop or on your device that you're using, to see if it's copying your outbound messages.
Right. So I could look at my settings on the iPhone, and you were talking about the rules, Peter. Where would they be?
Well, it depends. You can have filter rules in your email app, or you can have filter rules on the server.
Okay, I'll have a look and see if I get any filter rules on all that. But will the filter rules in the email app? Because as I said, when I send it from the PC, it just sends once. When I send it from the iPhone, it sends twice. Would the email app still only work on the iPhone?
It does sort of give you a hint that there's something funny going with your iPhone.
I think you're not unique here, Steve.
Across that before.
I don't think you're unique. Occasionally I get emails copied twice from different locations. It does happen.
There you go. You burst me bubble. I thought I was unique. Thank you.
All right.
Have you got a third device you can try to send on?
I've not actually, no. But
okay.
Yeah, but a good idea.
Now, one thing I'll say, not specific to that question in general, I started off today saying I created a area on our forums for any kind of follow-up chat. That sort of question would be a great one to post. Paul.
Paul, yeah.
Paul, and you're muted. And you're still muted, Paul. Okay.
Not according to my screen, he's not muted now. That was the same thing before.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Zoom that's dropping out. It could well be that there's two things happening on your iPhone app. It's a setting you've got, and it might be trying to send it by two different protocols, or it could well be that your signal's dropping out. It will try so many times, and then it will give up. And then when it gets a signal properly, or it finds it can get the packets through, it can transmit it again. And I've noticed that can happen sometimes. It may not be your problem, but I have seen it occasionally when I've been in an area where the connectivity is not great. And I thought, well, I know I didn't send that twice, but it has got through twice. And it happens on other apps like WhatsApp and things as well. So just check your connectivity and check the timestamp of both of those emails that have come through twice.
Okay, I'll have a look into that. Thank you.
Okay, so back to the slides. Good that we got discussion. So when you're configuring IMAP and POP3, very similar to SMTP, you'll get these details from your email provider. You'll need either a POP port number, which is typically 110 for unencrypted and 995 for encrypted. You'll need the host name, of course. And for IMAP, same sort of thing. 143 port is typically standard for plain, and 993 for unencrypted. And you'll definitely need your username and password there. All of this will be provided by your email provider. So on to spam filtering. Okay, so what is spam? It's simply unwanted or unsolicited mail, usually sent in bulk. Now, to get rid of spam, which is probably, to be fair, I think it's less of an issue now than it used to be. But one thing you can do is you can use a desktop filter. So when you download your message from your server, your desktop client will look at that email and decide whether it's a good message or a spam message, and then we'll do something with it. So it'll either, put it into a spam folder or delete it. And these are usually based on like machine learning. So over time, you tag individual emails as, good or spam, and then the machine learning in your email client will then learn and usually get, 95% right to filter all this junk mail out of you. So you're left with something reasonable cleaner, but it does require teaching. These days, of course, most of us will make use of server-based filtering. So particularly for, Google particularly is very good for spam filtering. You just don't see any spam if you use Gmail. If you use an alternative, hopefully they've got some good spam filter on the server. so that your client just downloads everything, and it should be pretty rare that you see any spam. And the nice thing is it's someone else managing that spam filter if you can get your server to do it. Yes, so emails are usually tagged as spam with a header. If you look at the headers in your spam folder, you'll see different types of headers indicating that a message is spam or not. And typically you'll filter it into a spam or junk folder, or even just deleted, just not available. And I think on Gmail, it may well just not appear at all unless you search for it. And these folders are usually periodically trimmed, the spam and junk folder, so it doesn't build up. Sometimes you can get around spam filtering if it's filtering too much by simply making sure that the sender is already in your address book. So you can imagine an email coming to your IMAP server. Your IMAP server is deciding whether a message is spam. If it manages your list of contacts, then it's got some more clues to determine if it's going to be a spam or not. But those were
can I just come in on the spam thing?
Yep.
Because I had a problem some time ago when I was sending out bulk emails to say 100 or 200 people, and that was getting stopped by Gmail.
Yep.
And I was concerned about how I could do that, and the only way I found out to do it was to split the address list into multiple parts. 2 was usually sufficient. Send it out twice. But I got my ISP is Zen, and I checked with Zen about it, and they say that there is a way that they can get approved that they are a recognized internet service provider or email server. And I don't now remember what they said at the time that they had to do, and they were recognized, so I shouldn't have that problem now with them. Do you know about that?
Yeah, we'll talk about that on the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It is becoming a big issue. I say we'll go through the kind of current way to handle that.
Sorry, I think I'm probably missed. You said that, did you, about on Gmail, if you get spam stopped by Gmail themselves, how do you find the spam?
Yeah,
if you go on the web browser, on the left-hand column, down it'll be hidden, but there'll be more at the bottom of the list. If you tap on more, then you'll find your spam box.
Yes, so with Gmail, with IMAP servers, you'll usually find your messages in one of the folders. Gmail's a little bit different because they're quite happy to have messages still stored, but not in any folder. So they're kind of folderless, if you like. And the only way to find those email messages is to do a search. If you know what you're searching for, which is a bit of a pain. What I was going to say about Gmail in particular, the free service, the free or even chargeable for disk space, is meant for individuals, not for bulk sending of emails. And so Google will jump on you if you start using, a personal Gmail account as if you were a business. And what they really want you to do, of course, is buy a business style account from Google, and then they will be much more permissive about bulk emails.
This was just for clubs.
Yeah. It's exactly the difference as far as Google is concerned, whether it's a club or a commercial company. If you're doing bulk emails, then you've got to be a little bit careful. I mean, what most people do, what we do at U3A Communities, we use tools like MailPoet to send bulk emails, and that does all the various tricks, sends them in small spurts and so on to try and get around all these sorts of things.
Okay.
Right, Frank, you got your hand up. And you're muted.
A couple of years ago, I had a real problem with overkill in my spam filter provided by my ISP, which in theory is a Canadian firm, Rogers, but actually is Yahoo email. I complained. I mean, it was just crazy. It would pick off one-on-one emails that had gotten from the person who had sent it me one before. And so I had to check it almost every day. In any event, I complained to Rogers. They explained they had no control over it. It's really Yahoo, blah, blah, blah. But I kept complaining, and finally that stopped happening. So I just mentioned that out of interest. With respect to avoiding being identified as a spammer, I've followed this rule now for many, many years. I never send to more than 45 people because I was told at one time, oh, that's the cutoff. Subsequently, I've learned, they're not going to tell you what the cutoff is because that would favor the spammers, and it can be somewhat random. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I suspect Neil's going to raise a question, which I'm just about to say, actually. But I've noticed, on the same vein, I've noticed that BT Internet in particular is getting very fussy about incoming messages and rejecting them as spam. And I found out only yesterday, if you find that emails are being rejected by BT Internet or OpenReach or one of the other BT types, what you should do is complain to postmaster@btinternet.com, and they will sort out. Neil, hopefully I'm not pre-guessing your question. And you're muted, Neil. Neil, still muted. Neil, hello, Neil.
Could I ask, I take it you don't have the power to unmute them, is that so?
No, I can only.
Yeah, sorry. It's just something. My computer's playing silly persons today. Yeah, and one thing you're partly right, Peter. Yeah, I think I've spoken to you about the fact that on doing these sort of group style things, and I do quite a lot of group things, but I noticed over the last 2.5 years that there are various little groups where this happens from time to time. I've had 2 bouts where it was everybody was using Outlook. There was one time where all my emails were being deleted, and I had to go on to Spamhaus, who were being used as the server's filtering mechanism, and that was quite difficult to get yourself recognized as not being a spam agent. But I did manage to get a response from them in the end. But that, as has been said, the situation seems to be improved. And it may also be that I am using different methods for sending now. So it may simply be that I'm actually using things which make life a lot easier. But definitely between 2 years ago and 6 months ago, 8 months ago, it was fairly common for me to lose anything up to about 25% of the people I was sending to.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we use MailPoet, of course, because that'll sort of handle that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, Neil, we are small guys compared with Google and Yahoo and stuff like that, and it can be a devil of a time to get your complaint noticed.
Years ago, and I'm sure the situation has changed, I found that I was sending emails from work to various parts of the world, and I found that they wouldn't get through to the research lab in Germany. Fortunately, I was able to check with the German ISP at that end as to why, and it was because one of the servers in the route that I was using was blacklisted.
Yeah,
it was BT.com. apparently BT was blacklisted by the Germans. I had a similar thing when my mobile phone, when I was on with Vodafone, and there was it turned out that Vodafone was blacklisted.
Yeah.
And they managed to give me, for a temporary arrangement, a special server for my mobile, which worked till they pulled it. So I hope that sort of thing doesn't happen these days, but it was this blacklisting. And I couldn't get BT unblacklisted by the Germans.
Yeah, it is a problem. But let's talk next about how spam filtering's actually working now.
Just 1 second. Hello.
SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. I don't know how many of you have heard of these terms, but this is a new way. And without saying new, these technologies have been around for a while, but February this year, Google and Yahoo in particular actually started enforcing these protocols. So if you found that emails were working before February and stopped working after February, chances are it could be related to this stuff. So let's go through what these new standards are and how it helps spam filtering. So what we're trying to do here is to add proof that the sender is who they say they are. And if you can prove that you are who you say you are, then your email will get through. If you can't prove it, it's very likely to be tagged as spam. So SPF, Sender Policy Framework. What this does, again, it uses DNS. It adds a DNS record to identify servers that are allowed to send email on your behalf. So, for example, if you've got, let's stick to the same example, you've got a virginmedia.com email address, there should be an SPF DNS record for Virgin Media that says any messages from a user at Virgin Media can come from this list of servers. Okay, in other words, only servers that are allowed for that domain. So harry@my.com is sent from server mail.my.com. You would configure that in the SPF record. And so if you try to send a message from harry@my.com via Yahoo, then it will be treated as spam because it's not coming from a recognized email server. Paul.
Yeah, how is that authenticated though? Is there a server? Is there a signed challenge response with the server to make sure it is that server, and an X509 type certification of the server? Because it's relatively easy to spoof email, isn't it? And not just the part before the @ as well.
Yeah, you can spoof the email, but it's very hard to update DNS records if you don't own that domain. In fact, you can't.
Okay, so it's looking at the exact DNS record to do that.
Yeah, it's
okay. Thanks.
The fact that you can't edit DNS is really the protection here. Wow.
Hi. I've just got an interesting spam problem or junk problem. You know, being inspired to look at my junk folder on my phone, I find two emails that are definitely not spam that are sent to my junk folder. Now I know one of them's not well, I know the first one can't be a problem because it's from my son, and but it's only a one-line email. He's just replied to me with some particular problem, and I said, "Have you done this?" And he's put back, "Yes, I did so and so 2 days ago." And
yes. So traditional spam filters before this SPF and stuff came in would be heuristics, if you like. It's machine learning that, you know, some messages will be eventually tagged as spam because they follow a pattern that previous emails. And these patterns can be, you know, from the from address or to address, if your email contains the word Viagra, or, you know, a common one, if it's a one-line email, you know, may well be tagged as spam by traditional spam filters.
Yeah, the other one is
So what you should do, I mean, the general principle is, if you find a genuine email in your spam folder, you need to tag it that it's not spam, so your spam filtering can learn from that. So the next time it's more likely to get it right.
the other one is from is an interesting one because it's from somebody to whom I owe some money, and it's perfectly genuine. They do owe them. I do owe them some money, but it's come through 5 times.
It could be that the sender had a bounced email and then they just hit send again.
Right. Okay, 6 times. Beg its pardon. When I looked at.
Yeah, emails are not a guaranteed service, right? So there's no guarantee how many copies will go, how many will be received, or when they'll be received. So the example Peter gave was that the email was sent, but the sending post office didn't get an alert that it didn't arrive. And so it tried sending it again. So there's no guarantees with email. It's something that most people kind of forget.
Good point.
Okay, carrying on with this SPF stuff. So SPF Sender Policy Framework, it's a way to have a DNS record that says that emails must come from one or more of these servers. And again, MX Toolbox is a way that you can check the SPF records for your domain. So if you're having spam problems, you can go to this address, you can type in, you know, your email domain, virginmedia.com, and it'll check to make sure you've got your SPF record set correctly. And if it's not set correctly, then you should contact your mail provider and tell them to set it correctly. Really is quite fundamental these days. Right, DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail, that stands for. So this is a bit more convoluted. So in this case, we have a DNS record which has your public key. Okay, which means that emails can be signed or encrypted with your private key. And again, we've got a DKIM diagnostics where you can go and check to make sure that emails have correctly got your DKIM header. And these actually, by the way, are linked with headers in your emails. You can go and have a look at it. On the MX Toolbox, you can cut and paste your email, your raw source of your email, into MX Toolbox, and it will diagnose and actually come up with some reasons why it's not compliant to these, and hence why a server might be treating it as spam. And finally, we've got DMARC, which is a reporting mechanism, stands for Domain-Based Message Authenticating, Reporting and Conformance. And again, it adds a DNS text records containing policies. So in other words, if your email has failed one of these tests to see if it's authentic or not, the DMARC record will describe how to handle that message. So it might say, tag it as spam, or it might say delete it, not deliver it at all, and maybe generate a report to the person managing that domain. And again, we've got tools on mxtoolbox.com where you can go and check your stuff. Paul.
Yeah, where's the public key stored? So if I generate a private key to sign my emails, and I know this was a problem some years ago because of lack of standardization across companies, and it was one of the reasons that PGP didn't really take off at first, because it was not very scalable. Everybody had to exchange keys with everybody else to be able to make it work. There was no public servers. But where does my key, my public verification key get stored to verify that the email is actually from me? And secondly, is there a digest created a hash, and is that hash signed for authentication over the whole message, or is it just verifying it came from me?
Good questions. I'm probably not going to be able to answer those officially without digging it up. In my case, I own a couple of domains now, and the private key is managed by my mail server. So I deliver to my local mail server, and then it adds all the right headers for the DKIM stuff with the public key in DNS and the private key stored by my mail server.
Yeah. Okay. So you're running a separate server, and therefore you've got to keep that server online, haven't you? And
well, that could be the Gmail server, for example.
Yeah. Okay. And I think Gmail are starting to do it, and one or two others, but I don't think it's universal yet, is it?
It's actually pretty common because, as I say, Google and Yahoo started enforcing this stuff in February this year.
So it could be they're actually managing it on my behalf for me. If I send an
very,
email,
very,
Google
very
Mail
like,
account,
yep.
they're doing all this for me in the background, which is not a bad thing.
Yes, exactly. And it's worth getting an inbound email and having a look at the headers and see if you've got all these SPF and DKIM headers, and use these mxtoolbox.com to decode them. Little Steve.
Yes, I've just tried out your MX Toolbox. First time I've come across that, so thank you for that. And I put the email in that I was talking about. I was having problems with the duplication, and it's immediately come back with, well, 2 errors and 5 warnings. And one of them talks about DMARC quarantine / reject policy not enabled. Yep. Does that mean anything to you guys?
So this, as I was just saying, DMARC is a policy. With DMARC, the way you say it is, if email message fails one of these tests, what to do about it. And what you do is you mark it as quarantined, which means it will usually get put into a spam folder in a destination, or you can delete it, in which case it will never get delivered at all. So
talking about an individual email which has come through, or the email account in general?
The email account or the domain in general.
So my Hotmail domain is not recognized, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you just typed in hotmail.com in MX Toolbox and it says it doesn't have a valid DMARC record, then that's pretty bad.
Right, that's pretty bad then. What can I do about that?
The only thing you can do is contact Hotmail and say, please populate your DMARC DMARC record correctly.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Okay, so this is the way it works. So back to our diagram again. So we send a message, and as we're discussing with Paul, really, you send your message, and typically your mail server will add the DKIM header to your message. It'll get routed to the destination, and that destination server will then start doing the validation, and it will use DNS lookups to try and validate to see if this message is genuine. Did it come from one of the permitted sources? And it will validate the DKIM, it will validate the SPF, and then it will apply the DMARC policies. So if one of these fails, will it be quarantined, in other words, put into a spam folder, or will it actually be deleted? Reject, quarantine, or pass. That's the options. So your local email server should add the right headers, and then the destination email server then's got a much better chance to check to see if that message is spam or not, because it can verify it in 2 or 3 different ways before it will start delivering it. And this really is the kind of new way to do spam detection. DKIM, SPF, DMARC. Any other questions on this before we start wrapping up with kind of some of these annoying netiquette issues? Right, I'll play on netiquette. Right, this stuff has been around. Oh, Paul. Unmute, Paul.
Sorry, just a general warning though, even if everything checks out, there's no guarantee that the company you're talking to or is trying to sell you some service is actual genuine, because as far as I'm aware, there's no checking with Companies House. And in fact, a lot of these companies are based overseas anyway. So it could be a legitimate company with legitimate inverted commas. But if that company operates in a less than nice way to you, you know, you're verifying the emails come from them, but you're not actually verifying the probity of that company itself or where it's located. And it's just, I'm just saying that as a general warning, really.
Okay, thank you. So netiquette. So these rules have been around for ages, and most people know most of these rules. But what I found is that not everyone realised that these are actually formal rules captured in standards. That, you know, officially, you know, everyone. I mean, when I first moved from email addresses with exclamation marks in them to an ampersand sign, we actually had company training about all these sorts of things, you know, because not everyone knew them. So I've got a whole list of rules here, and I'm probably not going to go through all them all, but these are the general principles for using email. You know, use email the way you want others to use it. Standard courtesy stuff. Be careful when addressing emails. Decent subject. This is a good one. Be conservative in what you send and liberal to what you receive. That's kind of quite a good one. Consider the recipient's background. There's no point sending a great big long PhD dissertation to your grandmother. You know, that's not going to work well, unless your grandmother is a doctor, of course. Very good one here. And I think most of us will agree with this. Wait overnight to send emotional responses. You know, if you get, as I did the other day, got a flight cancellation, actually livid, I want to strangle BA. You know, wait until the next day before composing that complaint letter. You'll do a much better job in the morning. Be brief. This is perhaps an old one. Use plain text instead of HTML. I think these days most email clients will use HTML. Anyway, avoid chain layers. Use mixed case. Smileys. Smileys, you know, emojis as they're called now, have really been, you know, come back from the 70s. Keep a signature but short. Recheck your email for sitting send, so on and so forth. The last one here is, I think it's actually quite applicable now. Try to avoid proprietary formats. You know, for example, you know, I've got a Mac. I don't have or use Microsoft Office. If someone sends me a PowerPoint slides or a, you know, Microsoft Word file, chances are I'm not going to be able to read it. If someone sends me an open standard like, you know, PDF or something, then chances are I will be able to read it. So you always have to think about, not everyone has got the same tools as you do on your desktop. And this is the original standard. Actually worth a read about netiquette, because a lot of these things are kind of folklore. You probably know about them and they're usually a common courtesy, but there's some nice snippets in there. Right, here's a controversial one, and I like this because it's nice to be controversial. Posting style. Okay, so this is about when you reply to email messages. These days, I see most emails do what's called top posting. In other words, you get a message and you reply at the top. But there's other techniques, and in fact, the standards tend to point you to use an interleaved format or a bottom top process. But we'll describe what these look like. Always remember that when you're sending an email, particularly if you're replying, the goal is to be understood. So if you're sending a rubbish email and you've replied in a really awkward way, you know, you just may not be able to understood. So think, and there's a really good Wikipedia article on posting style, and that's definitely worth a read. But let's have some examples. So this is email replies, remember. So we can see in here, this is a reply message, and these little arrows are from the original email. So this is an interleaved reply. And you can see it's pretty clear, actually. If you read this email from top to bottom, you can see what's going on here. Oh, sorry. So the writer here is written at the top a little summary. And then he's quoted Joe and then replied to Joe. He's quoted Joe again and replied. He's quoted Mary and replied to Mary. And then he's provided a summary. So it's a nice way because you can look at that email from fresh. You can read it from top to bottom in a natural sort of like historical order, if you like. And it's reasonably clear, even though there's 3 people participating in this discussion. So whoever's written this has taken some care to make sure it's nice and clear that people who've written previous sentences are quoted, and it's nice, quiet response. So that's interleaved quoting. Another way is top posting, and this is what I see most of the time. And actually, because people are expecting top posts these days, you know, I end up doing it as well. So in this case, we've got 2 emails quoted, and we've got a top post response. Again, it's pretty clear because we've got the 2 responses. The problem with that email, though, it's not in a natural order. In other words, if you don't remember the original emails, you have to read this part first, then this part, and then finally the top bit, which is a little bit out of order, you know. And bottom post is popular in some places. And again, you've got quoted messages at the top, and then a summary, you know, a response at the bottom. And again, we're getting emails in date order. You can read that from top to bottom without getting lost. Another thing that's in the quoting rules is trimming messages. You know, if you've got a great big long message and you only really one part is relevant, feel free to trim it. So this is the original message, and then he's kind of trimmed a whole bunch of the original message, provided a little bit of summary, replied, and so you end up with a nice short response, which is nice and easy to read without, you know, bucketfuls of unnecessary text. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to let you read that without saying anything, if you can. And if you're not read it, you're supposed to read it from the bottom upwards, because if you top post, that's what you end up doing. What's the most annoying thing in email? Top posting. Why is top posting such a bad thing? Because it messes up the order which people normally read text. You see that around in sort of like traditional forums and such like. Now, what do I want to say about top posting? Top posting is by far the most common way that people use emails these days. And it usually works if the person you're replying to can remember in their head what they've sent. In other words, if you've got an email correspondence going on pretty quickly, you can top post because the receiver will remember it. But if you're taking a long time to respond, you know, perhaps several days, you're on holiday or something like that, you're not going to remember the email. And then you get this response back, which is all in the wrong order. And it takes you ages to kind of read the messages, or you kind of end up ignoring it. But I'm going to go back to the original point here. When you're replying to emails, the point is to make your message clear. You need to do whatever it takes to articulate what you're trying to say in a very easy to read way for your recipient. Neil.
It's just a quickie about this bottom posting. I didn't even know that existed. There have been occasions in which I've received an email which doesn't appear to have a response to it. And I suspect it might have been on occasions that people have done this thing about bottom posting, and because it isn't a protocol I recognise at all, I completely missed the response.
Yeah, but you know, Neil, if you think about other systems like chat, you know, Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, whatever, the most recent message is always at the bottom. And so, you know, if you've not read your message for a while, you know, you go back and read from the top downwards. And for some reason, people like to read emails in, you know, reverse order. But what works better, if you like bottom posting, is to make sure it's truncated. So you've only got a few lines to read. You're not going to miss the response in this message. But if you're quoting the whole message and it's a couple of pages long, the chances are, as you say, Neil, you'll just not realize there was a response in there.
One of the biggest annoying problems is if you top post and that's what you expect, and you then send it and the person who replies does bottom posting, and somebody else then does top posting, you can end up with them all in a great jumble.
Yeah, in that Wikipedia article I mentioned, they do discuss that. And they say, if I remember correctly, you know, you should really, if you're not the first repliers, stick to whatever the convention is. Otherwise, it gets confusing, as you say. Even though you have to read it in reverse order, it's better than reading half in reverse order and half in forward order and so on.
Exactly.
Mike.
Yeah, very good there, Peter. I mean, this is such a common problem that's one of the problems I find with this sort of thing is that people don't scroll down to see the entire message. So if I'm forwarding something, the first thing I say in reply is please scroll down so they can actually see the whole message and then they can reply appropriately. People just do not scroll down.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do the same thing, actually, particularly if you've got a message which contains multiple questions. You end up, it's going to be clearer to reply in line for each individual point. You know, you can easily make up a message. You get a message coming in, you know, shall we meet up on Friday or Saturday? And you reply, yes, or something like that. You know, it's very easy to respond and have a very confusing, when you're composing and make a very confusing message. It feels logical at the time, but if you read it back, then go, God, you know, that just doesn't make sense or it's not clear. So the goal really is to compose emails, think about it before sending, make sure it's readable in one way or another.
Sometimes you may be sending an email to somebody that you've not been communicating with for some time, but it's quite useful for you to effectively reply or forward an email exchange that you had with them some time before. Then you don't have to go through the whole introductory thing and say, look, we discussed such and such, or you helped me with this. Now I have another request. So all you're wanting them to do at the moment is to say, deal with the bit at the top, which is right top is. But by the way, there's all something below if you want to remember who I was and what we did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stand by what I say. You know, the goal is to communicate. So, you know, make sure your message is clear. And I mean, I don't see this very often these days. And we used to when I was working commercially, it happened all the time. But this idea of actually trimming something out, something that someone else has written. If you trim it and it makes your response more readable, then trim it. You know, it really is quite straightforward, really. Right, last topic, and I've actually started using this, and you'll see these sub-addresses and disposable addresses. So you usually have one email address. My email address is peter@plaw.co.uk. I own my own domain, and so I've got a username, and then that's my domain. These are the usual format of emails, but there is a thing called sub-addressing. Also known as plus addresses, and this has to be supported by your email server. So I know, for example, Gmail supports this. And the email server I'm currently using is Private Mail, and that also supports this. And what you do is you expand your email address, usual name, a plus sign, and then a tag @plaw.co.uk. And that email will still come to you, but that email will then be tagged as U3A, And typically your email server will then just push that into a subfolder called U3A. So you read these e-messages, user Peter with tag U3A on email domain plord.co.uk. And the nice thing about this is if someone copies your email address, you can actually start to trace where they actually copy this email address from. And of course, you can just simply stop using it and it doesn't really matter. So it's a nice way to tag it. Another way, yeah, or usually filter into folder. Some servers support disposable addresses. I know Apple support this, which is a feature. So when you're signing up to a new service, you can say, right, I want to use a disposable address. And they usually consist of, random sequence of letters or something. And your email server will then convert that disposal address to your actual address. And that disposal address, once you finish signing up with whatever temporary service you want to do, you can delete that disposal address and your proper personal email address remains protected and free from spamming from this service that you didn't really want to sign up to in the first place. John.
Just quickly on your Gmail thing, as well as the plus addresses, you can put dots anywhere in your Gmail address.
Right.
It achieves something similar. So
Okay.
Peter, you can put an E dot after E, and you can put many dots in if you want, I think. And it still recognizes it. It doesn't do the extra bit of filtering and putting them into folders, but it's another way of adding to traceability.
Okay, thank you for that. I didn't know that. Yes, so these disposable addresses, random sequence letters, and your email server will auto forward that to a regular account, and then you can delete this disposable address later, and it sort of like just disappears. Right, references, lots of them. All these protocols that I've talked about, SMTP, MIME, and so on and so forth, they're internet standards and you can go and read them, and they're actually pretty readable documents, these RFCs, requests for comments, and these are all the latest numbers I dug out, including netiquette, posting styles, and subaddressing and so forth. They're all standards. So yeah, and really when you think about it, the whole idea of the internet, you got so many different servers and desktops all communicating. Without standards, it'll be absolute chaos, or more chaos than it is now. So standards do underpin the internet, and emails are just full of all these different standards. All right, I believe I'm done with these slides. So
can I raise a couple of
problems? I'm going to go to Neil first. He put his hand up. Neil.
Oh, hell. Yeah, two things. One, on these sub-addresses, do you get many people that find it difficult to appreciate what is happening? Because when I first got a thing which had one of your +8 youth here, I thought, has he changed his address? Or, and so on. And I just let it lie. But I think I would get to a point where I was starting to question what was your main address? What was it all happening about? Because I had no idea what it meant at all originally.
Yeah, I think the way to see it is if someone says, right, this is my address, then you use it. That's it, really. From a receiver's point of view, these two addresses I've got on the screen there are exactly the same email address. The plus bit is just a little special tag. But yes, you're right that this plus addressing, sub-addressing isn't well known. It's been supported on Gmail for quite some time, but not many people sort of know about it, which is one reason I'm adding it here. And yeah, I'm starting to use it, and it is quite useful. Particularly you use a plus address for your account that you get your mobile phone from, a different plus address to your ISP, and so on and so forth. And you can keep your emails quite organized that way.
Can I just ask a thing on an entirely different subject altogether? I twice in my life I've had a particularly, well, in both instances it was Outlook, where the system crashes, and I had real problems with any sort of recovery. I'm admittedly, the last occasion was 25 years ago, but is there anything on it? I don't know whether it is still common or not, because it hasn't happened to me for years and years and years, but is there any way of doing better recovery? I mean, has that sort of situation altered at all over the years?
Well, if you use IMAP, the messages are on the server, right? So assuming that your server is still intact, you can just completely delete what's on the desktop, recreate your account and just wait a bit for all your emails to re-download.
I have a feeling both of these were in advance of IMAP. They were probably old long enough ago, and it was all when I was doing it on POP and God knows what. So okay, so of course if it's IMAP, it would be of course that's okay. Good.
A couple more things on that. So what I do, I've got a couple of Linux servers in my cupboard here, and I get them to periodically download my email onto my servers here as a backup. For exactly that reason, just use a command line tool that downloads servers. I've always got a copy of email outside of my usual way of using emails. And the third thing I'd say is many people, now I'm not one of them, and I don't think you are either, Neil, but many people see email as like a disposable thing. They don't really care if they get lost, a bit like chat, really. Don't really care it gets lost. And personally, I think email is a valuable resource, and I really don't want to lose the history. But not everyone thinks like that. Adrian.
Couple of points. I don't know whether you've come across a situation where you get an email in and it doesn't fill the complete width of the screen, except the signature. So you can end up with a situation where you've got the email text only using half the width of the screen or less than that, because the email signature or the footer after the signature is very wide. And that was a problem that my brother's firm used to have that problem. He never managed to get it sorted, but I understood it was an Outlook problem, and that effectively you had to put hard returns in the footer to the signature to keep that width down. And I noticed I still get emails like that, particularly coming in on my iPhone. One came in today from Which, so that it actually only covers about a quarter of the width of the phone screen because the footer is controlling it. So I don't know whether you've come across that or you've got a view about how to overcome that.
I've not had those sorts of problems recently. I used to have lots of formatting issues with messages come from Outlook, because Outlook, as part of the Microsoft camp, they always used to use HTML style messages with their own fonts and stuff like that. By the time it moved over, those fonts are not on that target system, and the messages look really bad. That situation seems to be a lot better these days from Outlook emails. But there is a standard for signatures. So it's not real standard, but it's a convention. And that is, you should put 3 dashes before your signature starts. So if you're using a signature, as part of your signature, start it with 3 dashes, because many email clients will then recognize that as a break to the signature and will, ignore it.
Okay, this is companies basically that put a great load of screed at the bottom, and that seems to be where the problem is. The other one that I'd be interested to know whether you've come across, I have in my motorhome a 4G Wi-Fi router.
Mm-hmm.
And I found on one occasion, probably the early occasions I was using it, it wouldn't recognize my Mac, my MacBook, but it worked fine with my phone until I removed the DNS server entry that I'd added to the Mac, which obviously we're trying to overwrite the one in the supplied by EE or whatever. Didn't have that on the phone, so that worked okay. As soon as I deleted this one, it worked. Have you come across that?
Yes, it's a way Mac DNS works. To be honest, coming from a Unix background, and I use Macs because they're mostly Unix. The DNS implementation on Macs is actually pretty poor. I think it's very inconsistent. You can have some tools that work and other tools that don't, and so on. They use all this Bonjour stuff or MDNS. So I think it's a little bit of a mess, the Mac DNS, but you're quite right. There's a form in the system settings on the Mac which lists the DNS service, and by default it's the one it's picked up from the network when you turned your machine on. But if you hit the plus button and do, add in the Google service, then that overwrites everything that the network's given you. And so if you put an invalid DNS server in there, or you picked it from somewhere else, then your machine on your network's not going to be doing any kind of reservate. You're not going to be able to convert any sort of name to IP address at all.
They were the Google ones, and they worked perfectly at home.
Right.
But they wouldn't work going on this 4G router.
Yeah, it could be your router blocks that, for some reason, I suppose. Yeah. Ray.
Oh, yeah, right. I have an interesting problem, which I don't think you'll have the answer to. I'm with Virgin Media as my ISP, and I got a very old Blue Yonder email address. And I think it was about June last year, Virgin Media had a major meltdown. All the emails stopped working for several days.
Yep.
And it took them weeks to get all the old IMAP emails back.
Yep.
But in the process of all that, they changed their login system. So you could use webmail with your normal password, but they then introduced an app-specific email password requirement.
Yep.
So anything that accessed the system via a mail client, you had to use this separate login. And what seems to have happened now, and I've had this problem since June last year, and I've hassled the 150 technical support people, and I spent hours on the phone, and I'll get very frustrated. What seems to be the situation is the webmail works okay, sending and receiving all the time, but as soon as I use any email client from any device, be it a phone or laptop, be it Android or Mac OS or Windows or whatever, I can always receive emails, but when it comes to sending, i.e. SMTP stuff, if I send between midnight and 8 o'clock in the morning, it will go. And after 8 o'clock in the morning, all the way through to the next midnight, it bounces, it rejects my login. I've done a thing called a curl test. Do you know about curl command?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've done it between 5 to 8 through to 8 o'clock, etc. And it just switches from happily accepting me to reject. Any thoughts? It's almost if they were running two SMTP servers.
Yeah, I have come across this issue with Virgin Media as it happens, and the way it does it uses OAuth for you to authenticate to the service first, and then that process of logging into Virgin Media will generate you a token, and that token is used as your password and will typically be added to your email client. So what you should do really is to make sure the password as part of your SMTP settings is this token, which you can copy from one of your other machines.
Okay, where do I find the token?
If you've got machines that are working and some that are not, go into the machines that are working, look at the configuration, see if you can find the password on it.
Every where I have an email client, this problem exists. And the only one that...
So what I suggest you do is, assuming hopefully you're using IMAP, so you've got nothing precious on your desktop, is to delete your account, re-add it, go through the Virgin Media login process on a web browser. That will generate you this token, which will then should be added to your email client as the SMTP password.
Ah, you're talking about the app specific password.
Yep.
Okay, I've gone through that process of resetting it about 5 or 6 times. It makes no difference.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, no instant answer. I'll have to get on to Virgin Media again. It's interesting there. I think from what I see from forums is Virgin Media claim they no longer support email. They're just an internet provider.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Okay. Mike.
Just something that I learned many years ago when email started was if you were unsure about a particular feature or what you were trying to set up, sending it to yourself is a good way of actually establishing whether the thing is working and you're getting the effect that you want. So, that's always a good closed loop system that you don't embarrass yourself by sending a load of stuff that doesn't appear anywhere.
Good point. Thank you.
Sorry?
I said good point. Thank you. Okay. Anything else from anyone relating to email or anything else really? I don't care. We are at the 2-hour mark now, which is quite a long meeting. But I think we covered some useful bits and pieces around email. If there's nothing from anyone else, I'm not seeing any hands up.
I'll just say thank you very much. It's been most interesting.
And don't forget,
Thank you.
Volunteers for one of the sessions coming up. So I'm sure you got some good ideas. All right, so let's close that for now. Thank you for attending, and speak to you next month.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Great.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for all the research and everything. They're absolutely brilliant. I always learn so much from your seminars.
That's the whole idea.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Right.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.